Typically, during the high holidays, we greet each other with the words, Shana Tova, Happy New Year. But let's be real, we said that last year, and this year didn't turn out so great. I feel like our world has changed so much since last year that all the things we used to say to each other no longer really work. For instance, how you holding up is the new, how are ya? And you want to answer with the same cliche, I'm fine. It's all good. Cabin fever is better than the other fever. It could be worse. Fake smile, fake smile, fake smile. It's been 6 months of this, and for all of us, it's been hard, and so are we still obligated to answer with that same shallowness? Or is this the moment to engage more fully in our authentic expression of our mental, spiritual, and physical states with one another? The American cliche veneer of how we're supposed to check in with each other is failing, or at least it's failing me. When I call someone who is homebound with 3 little kids, or a new widow in a silent home, or the furloughed, the laid off, the underpaid, or the overworked in a stressful work environment, or the grandmother watching her daughter taking care of her daughter all through the window or a screen, or the recent graduate who doesn't get to move into her first new dorm room, or the groom whose wedding is rescheduled indefinitely, or when I call you after the funeral that you couldn't be at physically, watching the casket descend in the ground while you at home imagine the feeling of holding a handful of earth to place into the grave. How can we ask, how are you? This is a time when no words feel right. And many of us should say, I'm fine, while inside we might be feeling, I am drowning. I think many of us say, I'm fine, because we want so badly for all to be just fine. We want to be those Instagram moms who are cutely collaging together all the baby photos, or the Facebook cooking warriors who are pumping out masterful sourdough breads, or the hobbyists who discover that the thing they're doing just for fun is actually a multi-million-dollar startup that they just needed enough time to get it all started. But I want to let you in on a secret. Even those people aren't okay or fine all the time. This isolation, crazy pandemic time is not for the faint of heart. This is an existential war on the soul, and sure, we can have gratitude for the joy of slowed down time with children, for job security, for good health, but gratitude isn't the primary mindset for anyone 100% of the time, particularly when we are swimming in a sea of pandemic insanity. I like to think of gratitude as that really amazing yoga pose. You know, the one where your hands are on your elbows and your legs are scissored in the air, and after like 3 stream yoga classes, you're like, I can totally do that one, but then you realize you can't even touch your toes yet, let alone do an intensely acrobatic yoga power move, just for instance. Anyhow, it takes a long, long time to get beyond touching our toes, to work through the walls of anxiety and grief and suffering, and to get to a place where we can maintain a sense of gratitude for an extended period of time. So give yourself a break. Cry, scream at the walls, stretch your suffering throughout your body so that you can make room to build the muscle that's gonna keep you going for the next chapter of this very long pandemic. This pandemic may well have placed us in an unprecedented moment, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the tools to endure it. Yom Kippur is all about letting it all out, the intentional and unintentional sins, how and when we're forgiven by God and other human beings, and when we forgive ourselves. And if after all the beating of our chests, we hear the canonized guidelines passed from generation to generation to generations for thousands of years, and how we get through the worst of times. Be safe. Take care of the vulnerable. Cry your heart out, rend your clothes, dump ashes on your head, and then get up. Walk through the wilderness. Cross the sea, because there's a promised land somewhere on the other side. In our tradition, in the search of promised land, there are 3 miraculous river crossings. The first one happens in Exodus, where, fresh out of Egypt, the Israelites are running for their lives. The slave masters are chasing behind them, and the only thing between slavery and promised land is the river before them. God, with Moses' help, or Moses with God's help, depending on how you tell the story, splits the seas, and the people walk to freedom, b'harava, on dry land. The second time is the book of Joshua. As the people carried the Ark of the Covenant into the Jordan River, the waters pile up in a single heap, and they stand on dry land, b'harava, as they cross. The third time, we're like, oh yeah, this miracle? Yeah, we know this, the dry ground thing. So it's in Kings, when Elijah the prophet needs to take his people across the Jordan River. And so he rolls up his coat, strikes the water, and voila, they cross, you guessed it, Baharava, on dry land. In each case, there's a river to be crossed, and the people are brought forward on dry land. In the word Baharava, the bet as prefix in Hebrew can mean two things. Either ba can mean on, as in on dry land, or the ba can mean in, as in the river. The faithful make it through treacherous crossings through water that would otherwise kill them by being in it. You can't make it through anything hard. You can't get to promised land, or even just the other side of whatever this mess is, unless you're in it. Before Joshua crosses that river, right after Moses dies and the mantle of leadership is handed to Joshua, God says to Joshua, "As I was with Moses, so I'll be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. Chazak ve'amatz, be bold and brave." And then Joshua repeats those same words of comfort to the people. Things are about to get real, he says, but chamatz ve'amatz, be bold and brave. Why does God and then Joshua reassure their people with two similar words? Chazak, strength, is the boldness that comes from ego, the inner sense of being that lets you take a deep breath and then jump into the sea, knowing that the first plunge is going to be cold as all get out. Chazak is taking the first step and then having the courage to do something even when you don't fully believe in your own abilities yet. Amatz, bravery, is the vulnerable edge of courage, the part in us that gets that we're in it, and on either side are walls of terrifying water that things are not fine, but in order for things to change, we must find a way to move forward. Sometimes we see the change we know we need to make, but the very idea of having to walk through that river into certain pain and vulnerability stops us from moving forward. We want to believe that we can get to skip straight through the hardship into "I'm feeling fine" without doing the hard work of being in it. We want to be full of gratitude, but we don't want to do the hard work of letting go and being vulnerable enough to grow. Gratitude, grace, and being okay don't come naturally. They're wrested from the clutches of the crap that we go through in our lives. And once we process it, do the deep personal work, then maybe we move ourselves from the river to the promised land that we seek. I can't tell you that it'll be worth it, or that it'll all work out and be okay. But I can tell you my own experience of what I have seen, what our community of Temple Sholom modeled when we entered our own river of change and miraculously found ourselves Baharava, on dry land. 6 years ago, our synagogue sold our building, and we took all of the money and invested it into a 5-year plan that included moving into a small, sweet, not very synagogue-looking office park. We were dying. So we jumped in the river and saw what we could do if we just gambled everything on our mission. We made a bunch of weird and fun artsy videos, and most people thought we'd close within a year. Instead, over the next 5 years, we saw a net growth of 65% in membership. We flipped our demographics and became young and queer, and then we just kept walking through that river. We reoriented our focus to be sourced in justice, got rid of dues and membership requirements. We invested in technology and online community, and now in a pandemic, we have very little overhead. We aren't cooling a 35,000 square foot building. The hobby of movie making gave us the skills to know how to film all of this. And 5 years ago, when we first jumped in the river, we looked crazy. We weren't sure we'd make it. It was just following our hearts. And now today, amidst a very different river, we look prescient, thriving. There was no telling what our dreams and hobbies and hopes would lead us to. It all depends on what side of the river you are seeing the story from. And I'd be lying if I said any of it was easy. If you told me how many martinis I'd be drinking in the shower while crying, I mean this literally, I bought a waterproof shelf for the glass, no exaggeration. If I had known how much of my soul would be required to lead that kind of change, I'm not sure I would have done it, even knowing the reward was so grand. We don't know what any river holds for us because there's always a price for being in something. Our inheritance as a Jewish people is both the river and the charav, the dry land, and it's our obligation to use our gifts to be in it so that we can deliver ourselves and others across the other side so long as the river will carry us. In this moment, promised land can mean lots of things. The way I imagine it is that promised land is a time-space moment where you breathe out in such a full and complete way that you realize and wonder that you've been holding your breath that whole time. Promised land looks like a sea of healthy people hugging and laughing, looks like dancing at a wedding, looks like privacy and space and touch. The high holiday season is supposed to reorient our focus by reminding us that maybe we've lost our way a little bit, got a little too much in our own heads, forgotten where we're heading, and now we need a realignment. So we atone, we forgive, we fast, we eat. This practice is called teshuvah, turning, and returning to our most authentic and holy selves. This is the way we try to find a taste of promised land, a hint of a redeemed world, an exercise where we stretch our psyche and spirit enough to get a glimpse of what's to come. This is really hard to do in isolation, praying from your couch as you stream. It's hard to be grateful, to feel redeemed, when we are worried for the people that we love, for ourselves, for the greater world. But this holy day wants us to stretch in both of our chazak, our boldness, and our amatz, our courageous hearts, and try to live into the moments of spaciousness, gratitude, and above all else, love. We already know that at the end of this pandemic, there's no normal to go back to. Inevitably, we will be forever changed by this moment. So we need to prepare now for the moment when it's all over, when we are through the river, crossed on dry land, and we emerge outside no longer in fear. And I hope that the world we enter into is one that has reoriented itself around humanity, that what we pray for in ourselves and others in our greater world comes to fruition. We have so little control of what's happening right now, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. We have more power than we can imagine to heal, to hurt, to forgive, to take this holy season as an opportunity to reboot and stretch ourselves closer to promised land. We don't need to stand our heads just yet. We can try to find the moments of joy that are given to us and that we are giving to the world, and then do it more. Because really, we are just fine. Before we continue back to our prayer service, I want to thank our many chavarim, our supporters of Temple Sholom, who have sustained our congregation and given tzedakah through gifts of time, talent, and finances. We couldn't have made it through these many rivers without your unwavering generosity. If you're not part of the Temple Sholom community, and would like to learn more, or are interested in becoming a financial partner in our ministry to help make services like this possible, please contact us. We'd love to hear from you.